Yeah, hello. I'm going to talk about Brett Kavanaugh and this woman, Christine Blasey Ford, which accused him of sexual assault when they were in high school. And I read as much evidence as I could find. And I'm going to tell you that I come to the conclusion that this woman is lying. And there's two general reasons why. Number one, all the facts that she gives are available in public records, which means you can look at his high school yearbook, you can look at Google Maps, you can look at books that his friends wrote, like one of his friends wrote a book, and you can read that and gather information about Brett Kavanaugh and concoct a story and say that this happened and then say, here's the evidence. Oh, look, it's also confirmed by his yearbook and this published book. It's like all the details come from information that's already been made public. So she's not releasing any previously unknown information. She's stating her evidence after the fact that it's been already published. That's one of the big problems in terms of her testimony. Now, the other issue is that she gave testimony that has been debunked by many people. And I'm not going to tell you that what she's saying is not true. What I'm going to tell you is what she said that other people say is not true. First of all, she claims that there was a person there who was a lifetime friend named Laylord or something like that. And that person denies that this ever happened. And she denies that she ever heard about it. Oh, there's something that I'm going to say that I never heard anybody mention that I came up with on my own. It has to do with the fact that she allegedly dated the guy named Squee, Chris Garrett or something like that. But I'm going to get to that afterwards. But there's a big loophole with her story that, like I said, I didn't find anyone mentioning this on the internet. So the other issue is she claims that she's afraid. She's asked to testify before Congress, but she says she can't because she's afraid to fly. However, they've proven that she isn't afraid to fly because she lived in Hawaii. She went on a lot of international vacations, and her ex-boyfriend testified that he flew with her on a plane and never mentioned it. She also testified she has an irrational fear that she requires a second door to her house that people say broke, that she claims was a problem with her marriage with her husband and they had to go to therapy, but people are saying that they have proof that the door was installed before before she claims that it was a problem, and that the permit filed with the government to do the work was many years earlier, like 5 or 6 or 10 years earlier or something like that. So there's another issue where she claims it happened in her late teens and in the mid 80s, but it ends up that Kavanaugh was at university in another city, so she changed the date to be the early 80s in her early teens. Um, okay, so the issue that I discovered is that she claims that she dated this guy named Garrett, Squee Garrett. But the problem is, if she dated him, it had to have been before the assault because he was at the party. Garrett was at the party. Do you really think that she would date him after being sexually assaulted at a party at his house by two of his friends? I mean, it just makes no sense. It had to have been the end of the dating. Number two, do you really think that Garrett would allow two of his friends to sexually assault his girlfriend at his house? The other issue is she is at his house, guy that she's been dating for a couple of months, and she doesn't know whose house it was, even though it's very close to the club, okay, where they all know each other from. They some sort of swim, and I'm like, it's like walking distance or something like that. It's really close. And she doesn't know how she got invited to the party, but her boyfriend's at the party. I mean, it just makes no sense. It sounds like what they did was they looked at his yearbook. He talks about his friends. They looked up the addresses. It was happened to be someone and a certain house happened to be near the club. It's like they're gleaming information from the yearbook. Uh, she says that she saw one of his friends at the grocery store. Because his friend acknowledged he was friends with Brett Kavanaugh and said he worked at the grocery store. What a coincidence! She happens to know him, and she happens to see him at the grocery store. It came from a published source. So that's why the information is suspicious. She didn't provide any other information about these guys other than stuff that came from the yearbook and the memoir and things that were publicly available. That sounds like a setup. It sounds like it was not factual. A lot of the facts that she gave were provided after Brett Kavanaugh released his calendar. So basically, he had this calendar, and she picked a date, and she said, "Yeah, that's the date that it happened." You know what I mean? So the calendar was released that morning. She released her testimony that evening, and it's like you're giving testimony. Why didn't you give the facts before the calendar was released? You know, when you give it after the calendar was released, your credibility nosedives. And she claims that she's at this party that she says was impromptu, that it was just spontaneously happened. But Brett puts things on his calendar, weeks in advance. It wasn't a spontaneous party. You don't put a spontaneous party on your calendar. They planned, he made plans with these other people to go to that party, which was on a weeknight when the parents weren't home. They knew that the parents were not going to be home. They knew that this night was going to happen. And she claims that it was impromptu and she doesn't know how it happened. She doesn't know how to get to the party. Okay, she doesn't know how she got to the party. She remembers being at the country club, and she remembers that the house was nearby, and it's very close. You can look up the address. It's literally minutes away or walking distance, and she doesn't remember how she got there. Who Either somebody gave you, who would have given you the ride to the party, or did you walk? It's not difficult to figure it out. It's not like your parents are going to pick you up and drive you to a party when you're 15 years old with a bunch of boys. I mean, I doubt that that would happen. It had to have been someone who attended the party that drove her there, or she got there on her own. It's not difficult to figure out what happened. So I don't believe her story. I think it's a load of BS. If you read, if you read the the liberal point of view, they're always going to say everything she says is true, and if you read the conservatives, they're always going to say everything she says is a lie. And I just really don't believe it. I think it's a crock of shit.